Stop. Don't scroll. If you're listening to this right now, it's not by accident. There's a quiet feeling inside you or sure that your life is moving, but you are not. And it's not because you're lazy, not because you lack motivation, not because you don't want more. It's because there is one moment you've been avoiding for years. Most people think change happens in years. Some believe it takes luck. Others wait for confidence. They're all wrong. Real change begins in 30 minutes. Not 30 minutes of hustle, not 30 minutes of planning, but 30 minutes of brutal honesty. If you stay until the end of this video, nothing magical will happen. You won't suddenly feel inspired. You won't wake up successful tomorrow. But you will understand why you've been stuck, even when you tried. You wake up and the day already owns you. Messages, deadlines, noise. You stay busy. You stay tired. You stay distracted. From the outside, it looks like you're moving forward. Inside, it feels like you're postponing your life. Not because you're weak, but because you haven't been alone with the truth in a long time. There was someone once, an ordinary person, a job, responsibilities, a routine that looked fine, no drama, no collapse, just a quiet exhaustion. He kept telling himself, now is not the right time. I'll start when things settle down, just a little longer. And he believed it, until one day he was left with silence. No notifications, no music, no one needing anything, just 30 minutes. 30 minutes he tried to escape, because silence doesn't comfort you. Silence exposes you. And in those 30 minutes, he saw something that changed everything. But before that, he had to face something uncomfortable, something most people avoid their entire lives. Stay with me. What comes next is the part most people run from. Here's the truth no one tells you. You don't stay stuck because life is hard. You stay stuck because your excuses sound reasonable. You call it patience. You call it preparation. You call it being realistic. But deep down, you know what it really is. Delay. You tell yourself, I'll start when I have more time, when I feel confident, when I'm ready. But readiness never comes, because confidence is not the entry point. Action is, and that's uncomfortable. This is where most people turn the video off, because it's easier to believe you're missing information than to admit you're avoiding responsibility. It's easier to blame circumstances than to face the fact that no one is coming to save you. That person I mentioned earlier, the one sitting in silence, he didn't have a dramatic breakdown. No tears, no screaming. Just a slow, heavy realization that his life didn't look the way it did because of bad luck. It looked that way because of thousands of small decisions to wait. He realized something terrifying. Nothing was actually stopping him. Not his past, not other people, not the system. Just his fear of being seen trying and possibly failing. You know that fear. The fear of committing and finding out you're not as capable as you hoped. The fear of starting and losing the excuse of potential. Because once you act, you lose the comfort of imagination. In those 30 minutes, he saw how often he said later when he meant never. How often he chose distraction over direction. How often he stayed busy to avoid being honest. And here's the part that hurts. He realized no one forced that life on him. He participated in it every single day. This is the moment where most people shut down. They feel exposed, judged, defensive. If that's you right now, good. That means something is breaking. Because growth doesn't start with motivation. It starts with discomfort you stop running from. And the next thing he faced was the hardest one of all. Not failure, not fear, but the question that changes everything. If no one is to blame, then what am I going to do about it? Stay with me. This is where the real shift begins. Those 30 minutes didn't feel dramatic. No music, no sudden clarity, no cinematic moment, just a weight, a heavy, uncomfortable pressure that slowly filled the silence. Because when you remove the noise, the excuses stop working. At first, his mind tried to escape. He thought about things he should do, about messages he might have missed, about problems that felt urgent. Anything, as long as he didn't have to stay here, but there was nowhere to go. And then something strange happened. The noise inside him got louder. Not panic, not fear, truth. He realized how carefully he had built his life to avoid asking himself real questions. He stayed busy so he wouldn't have to feel empty. He stayed tired so he wouldn't have to make decisions. He stayed distracted so he wouldn't have to choose. And that's when it hit him. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't a temporary phase. This was a life he had been silently agreeing to. He remembered moments he avoided thinking about, opportunities he didn't take, not because he couldn't, but because it was easier to say later, conversations he never had, ideas he never tested, versions of himself he never allowed to exist, not because they were impossible, but because they were uncomfortable. He saw the pattern. Every time life asked him to step forward, he stepped sideways. Every time he felt fear, he dressed it up as logic. Every time he wanted more, he convinced himself it was unrealistic. And suddenly the most painful thought surfaced. No one took his life away from him. He gave it away, slowly, day by day, choice by choice. This is the moment most people never reach, because it hurts too much. It's easier to believe you were unlucky than to admit you were passive. It's easier to blame the world than to accept your own participation. His chest felt tight, not from panic, from recognition. He finally saw the cost of waiting, years spent preparing for a moment that never arrived. Energy wasted explaining why now wasn't the time, a future postponed so often it started to feel imaginary. And then came the most dangerous thought of all. What if this is it? What if nothing changes? What if 5 years from now he's having the same realization, in a different room, with more regret and less time? That thought broke him. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. He understood something most people don't want to hear. Time doesn't respond to intention. It responds to action. And waiting doesn't protect you. It slowly erases you. In those 30 minutes, he didn't find motivation. He found responsibility. The kind that doesn't feel empowering. It feels heavy, because now he knew. And once you know, you can't unsee it. This was the lowest point. Not because his life was falling apart, but because he could no longer lie to himself. The illusion was gone. And standing there, with nothing left to blame, nothing left to postpone, nothing left to distract him, he faced the only real question left. Not, can I do this? But, if I don't change now, when exactly do I plan to? Most people turn away at this moment, because the next step doesn't involve motivation. It involves a decision. And that's where everything either ends or finally begins. Stay with me. The next part is where excuses die. What happened next didn't look like change. There was no rush of energy, no sudden belief, no moment of confidence, just silence. But this time, it felt different. Because now the silence wasn't empty. It was clear. He sat there knowing one thing for sure. Nothing was going to save him from this moment. Not a video, not advice, not another year of thinking. Only a decision. This is where most motivational stories lie. They tell you to feel ready, to believe in yourself, to wait for the right mindset. But the truth is harsher. Real decisions are made when you don't feel ready, when belief is missing, when motivation is gone. He didn't suddenly like his future. He simply stopped avoiding it. For the first time, he asked himself questions he had been dodging for years. Not dramatic questions, honest ones. What am I pretending not to know? What do I keep explaining instead of changing? What would I do differently if no one ever applauded me? Those questions didn't feel empowering. They felt exposing because the answers were simple and uncomfortable. He realized how much energy he spent managing appearances, trying to look like he was on the way, trying to seem busy enough to justify staying the same. How often he chose comfort and called it patience. How often he chose safety and called it wisdom. And then came a realization that stripped away the last excuse. He didn't need a new life. He needed a different standard. A standard where waiting is no longer acceptable, explaining is no longer progress, and comfort is no longer the priority. This wasn't about ambition. It was about integrity, about living in a way that didn't require constant justification. He didn't write a plan. He didn't visualize success. He didn't promise himself anything big. He chose something smaller and harder. He chose to act without needing to feel good first. That's the part no one talks about. Action doesn't come from confidence. Confidence comes after action. He knew fear would still be there. Doubt would still be there. Resistance would show up every morning. But now he understood something crucial. Fear was no longer a signal to stop. It was just background noise. So he asked one final question. What is the smallest action I've been avoiding that would prove I'm done waiting? Not the perfect action, not the impressive one, the honest one. It could have been a message he kept rewriting but never sent, a conversation he kept postponing, a decision he kept framing as not urgent, something small but real. And then he did it, not confidently, not proudly, quietly. No announcement, no witnesses, no emotional payoff, just movement. That moment didn't change his life, but it changed his relationship with himself. For the first time in years, his actions matched his thoughts. There was no gap between intention and behavior, no internal negotiation, no delay. And something subtle shifted, not externally, internally. He stopped seeing himself as someone about to begin. He became someone who had begun. That identity change mattered more than any result, because now every future decision would be filtered through a new lens. Does this move me forward, or am I delaying again? This is where real momentum starts. Not when life becomes easier, but when avoidance becomes unacceptable. Nothing magical happened afterward. The next day still felt normal. Problems didn't disappear. Fear still showed up. But something was gone. The illusion that he had time to waste. He no longer needed motivation. He had clarity, and clarity doesn't scream. It doesn't hype. It simply refuses to let you lie anymore. This is the moment most people never reach, because it requires letting go of the version of yourself that always had an excuse. But once you reach it, there's no going back. Now listen carefully, because this part is not about him anymore. It's about you. Up to this point, you could stay at a safe distance. You could nod. You could agree. You could think, yes, that makes sense. But agreement changes nothing. Understanding changes nothing. Only one thing does. What you do after this ends. Right now, your mind is already trying to escape. It's looking for exits. You're thinking about what you'll do later, what you need to check, where you need to be. That's normal. That's resistance. Because deep down, you already know this isn't about inspiration. It's about exposure. You don't need another plan. You don't need more information. You don't need to feel ready. You need a moment where you stop negotiating with yourself. Most people ruin their lives not with one big mistake, but with constant delay. They postpone decisions until postponement becomes identity. They call it patience. They call it caution. They call it realism. But it's fear. And fear doesn't disappear when you wait. It grows roots. Think about this honestly. How many times have you told yourself, I'll start when things calm down, when I feel more confident, when I have more clarity? And how many times did that moment arrive? Be honest. Not dramatic, just honest. You don't lack discipline. You lack a line you refuse to cross, a standard you refuse to lower. That's what those 30 minutes are for. Not to fix your life, to draw a line. Here's the truth no one tells you. You don't change your life by deciding what you want. You change your life by deciding what you're no longer willing to tolerate. So this is the moment, not tomorrow, not next week, now. When this video ends, don't rush back into noise. Don't scroll. Don't distract yourself. Give yourself 30 minutes. No phone, no music, no input, just you. And ask yourself questions that don't allow comfortable answers. Not, what do I want? Ask, what am I avoiding because it scares me? Where am I waiting instead of choosing? What truth do I already know, but keep ignoring? What action have I delayed so long it now feels heavy? Don't answer with poetry. Answer with facts. You might feel uncomfortable. Good. That discomfort is honesty finally reaching the surface, and then choose one action. Not the biggest, the real one. The one you've been rehearsing in your head but never committing to. A message, a decision, a boundary, a step forward. Do it badly. Do it scared. Do it quietly, but do it now. Because here's what happens next. If you don't, nothing. And then a little more nothing. Days pass, weeks pass, years pass, and one day you'll remember moments like this, when you felt close to something real and realize you chose comfort instead. This is not about becoming extraordinary. It's about refusing to disappear quietly. You don't need permission. You don't need applause. You don't need certainty. You need integrity, the kind where your actions finally align with what you know is true. Those 30 minutes are not special because they change everything. They're special because they start something. And once something starts, you are no longer waiting. This video ends here, but the moment doesn't. What happens next decides whether this was content or a turning point. The choice is simple, not easy. Simple. Stay seated. Turn everything off. Start the 30 minutes. And don't lie to yourself. Because the life you want is not on the other side of motivation. It's on the other side of delay. And this is the moment you either cross that line or keep explaining why someday would have been better. The timer starts now,